Hello, everyone. Welcome and good morning. My name is Rina Alexin, and I am the CEO of 280 Group.
And I'm Roger Snyder, VP of Marketing.
VP of Marketing. And we are very excited to present the first installment of our Product Leadership Webinar series. In a few minutes, Roger will be leading you through the 5 steps to optimize and transform your product management teams and organizations. But before we get started, let's go over just a few housekeeping items. After this webinar, please stay connected and engage with your peers. You can do that by joining our LinkedIn group today. Use this group as a forum to connect and share best practices, talk about your issues, plus get updated when we release great new content. At 280 Group, we love interacting with our fans, and during this webinar, we encourage you to post questions and comments as well as give us feedback. You can use the chat box located on the right of your screen and type in questions at any time. We will leave time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. We would also like to take this opportunity to answer the most popular question we receive, which is, can I watch this webinar later? The answer, of course, is yes. All attendees will receive a link to the recorded webinar after the recording has ended. So thank you again for joining us today. On the agenda for today's webcast, first, I'll take a minute and introduce what 280 Group is all about. Then we'll go over what you can expect from our Product Leadership Webinar series, after which I'll turn things over to Roger. So at 280 Group, our mission is to empower product managers to do great product management and become product leaders. We do that with our methodology and framework, the Optimal Product Process. The Optimal Product Process, or OPP as we call it, was designed by senior product leaders with a combined 150 years of hands-on working experience. It is a powerful framework that works for products in any industry at any stage of the life cycle and with any development methodology. The Optimal Product Process is just one pillar of how 280 Group helps transform product teams around the world. Continue your learning after this webinar and make sure to download the Optimal Product Process ebook in our free resources. We are truly excited to launch our new webinar series this morning. We have put a lot of thought into the topics we'll be covering over the next few months. To start, as good product managers, we spoke with your peers to uncover their priorities, which were to grow as product leaders and improve their product teams. Our product leadership series will cover critical topics across several themes. Today, we'll be talking about how to transform teams and optimize them to produce great products. Look out for future webinars that will cover topics around professional development, team development, and how to navigate and produce positive and, more importantly, long-lasting change. Our ultimate goal, which is our mission at 280 Group, is to help you and your teams build great products that delight customers. So that's a little about us, and now I'm going to turn it over to Roger. As I mentioned, he is our VP of Marketing and also a Principal Consultant and Trainer. Roger has over 25 years of experience in high-tech and product management. Before joining 280 Group, Roger led product teams for over 15 years, serving as Senior Director or VP of Product Management at multiple firms, including OpenWave, Immersion, and Microsoft. As a consultant and trainer, Roger has worked with companies in a multitude of industries, including consumer products, technology, SaaS, mobile, health insurance, and professional services. He has used his expertise to help companies improve product strategy development, hold product considerations, conduct competitive and market research, and produce great roadmaps. Roger is a member of AIPMM, a Certified Product Manager, Agile Certified Product Manager, and Product Owner. He has a BS in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science from UC Berkeley, and an MBA from Santa Clara University. Roger, take it away.
Thank you very much, Rina. So today we're going to start this journey of figuring out how you transform your product management team. And we're going to start off by understanding a little bit about how you optimize product management, and then these 5 steps to transform your team, and then we'll have time for questions. But first, let's talk a little bit about who we have in the audience today. It's great to see so many people have logged in. We looked at our audience demographics and noticed that we've got over 30% of our attendees are either vice presidents or directors of product management. Another 35% are product managers or product marketing managers, and then quite a mix of other folks that are interested in becoming enabled in order to lead in product management. All right, so let's talk about transformation first off. We start with a definition from McKinsey & Company, and their definition is a good one in that it talks about we're trying to implement ways to really make significant step change. You really want a sustainable boost in business results, not some sort of fad, not some sort of just quick fix, but actually what we call this transformation. And from our perspective in the product management context, that means optimizing your product management team so they can deliver the best products possible that achieve great business results. So what do we mean by optimized? Some of you may have seen this slide before, and it is about our experiences over the years, over 20 years, working with various companies and seeing that there is a direct relationship between how well organized and how well put together a product management team is and how well they are able to realize profits and especially important, customer satisfaction.
And while you are currently attending this webinar, we do recommend you take a quick look at this rubric here and try to think, where are you today with your team?
Mm-hmm. Our goal is to get your team to the point where it's optimized, right? Where your product processes are clear and repeatable, where everybody on the team, and I don't just mean the product management team, but also your larger core team. So the folks you're working with to develop the products, as well as your marketing team, your sales team, everybody understands the roles and positions they play. So there's good clarity in roles and in decision making. And ultimately our goal is to make product managers into strategic product leaders. That requires, though, that they're fully trained, that they know all of the various skills that they have to be able to put into action every day, and that they are able to actually create company value. And that's something that's really important. And there's a flip side to this, too. The company has to value the role of product management as well. If you are able to get your product management team optimized, then these are some of the benefits you're going to see. Your company becomes more strategic in the way it thinks about its products. You have fewer wasted development resources, you're able to move your team and your career forward, and you're able to maximize revenues and profits. And that ultimately, you're doing that with better products, right? That's the ultimate goal of creating an optimized product management team, of going through this whole transformation process. So now what I would like to do, Rina, is let's conduct a little poll and see in our audience, how many have a specific strategy for optimizing product management at their company?
Great. We have now just launched a poll. Please select one of the following to answer the question. So do you have a specific strategy for optimizing product management at your company? Yes, no, or just kind of. So we're waiting for responses to come in. We're getting a couple of no, a couple of kind of. All right. We'll be closing the poll shortly.
Let's see some more votes coming in.
Yeah.
Exciting to see this happening in real time. Interesting. The answers are not where I thought they would be headed, actually.
Me too. But this is great. This actually goes into why people are tuning into our webcast. All right. So thank you so much for voting. I'm going to be closing the poll and sharing results. So what we see here is most have voted either no or kind of.
Right. So they're somewhere in between, right? The kind of is state, I was expecting that would be the largest number, where there's some sense that they've been able to optimize product management, but there's not a really strong sense of that. Now, it's encouraging that 10% said yes. So, that's better than it was even 5 years ago. But the number of no's is certainly very high as well. So that's good. Let's talk a little bit then about how do we help you get fully optimized. Now, we've conducted a number of different studies over the years, and what we have found is that when you optimize your product management team, you're able to realize skill increases by 11% on average, but things like the weakest skills that a product manager may have, so areas like pricing, for example, or how to end of life a product, those skills can improve by as much as 43%. So significant increases when you're working on improving your team's skills. We've also seen, and this is from both direct responses as well as from our survey we conducted back in 2017, that profits can increase from 5 to to 34%.
Right.
Significant increases.
And that just makes sense since you're not spending time producing products that nobody really wants.
Right. So what we've seen here is an ROI calculator, and this is something that we developed a while ago, and you'll see that there's a link down at the bottom, and I think Rina will paste that link into the chat box for you as well. What this shows is a simple calculation, a pretty straightforward spreadsheet, and again, we've got this as a form online on our website, that shows you for the investment you make in improving your product management function, what can that return be? And we break this return down in how it will increase your profits, and we went with a pretty conservative estimate of only a 5% increase in profits, and how it will save in terms of cost savings. Now, you can enter your own assumptions when you go online and use our form, but you can see here that the return on investment for training is very significant, right? We see over a 900% improvement here, and that's with small percentage improvements in profits and cost savings. That's because for a company of a good size, these costs are really small relative to the benefits you're going to receive. So I encourage you to follow that link and try out the ROI calculator yourself. Let's start diving in now into the actual steps you want to take to transform your product management team. Here are the 5 steps. I'll go over them at a high level first. We're going to talk about the fact that you need to assess and set your goals and build what we call a long-term plan. I've done this myself at 3 different companies over the course of my career, where you need to not think that you're going to be able to solve problems overnight. Every time I've done this, I've told a CEO, look, this is a 2 or 3 year process to be able to go from a product management team that's kind of disorganized and not leading to a fully optimized product management team. This is a long-term commitment. Once you have that plan in place, then we talk about how do you optimize your people, and then optimize process and tools. And then we step back a little bit and talk about the fact that this change management has to be holistic. It of course is centered on product management, but it's also going to require changes throughout the organization. All right, so let's dive in. We've got let's look that as you're looking at how you're going to optimize your team, you're going to need to consider people, process, and tools. And we'll come back to this a couple of times, but I just want to set that framework in your mind as we go through the slides. All right, so step 1, we talked about this a little bit. Assess and set your goals. You do need to first figure out where are you? What parts of your organization are working well? What parts are not working well? Of course, you're going to need to cover people, process, and tools. And you're going to need to establish some baselines. Now, one of the things you can use to kind of set your baseline against is our own study we conducted earlier this year on product management skills. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. And then, of course, you've got to set your goals. Now, I did a little bit of work on figuring out, is there proof that when you set goals that there's actually a difference in your outcomes? And it was interesting to find that there were a number of different studies on the web, some true and some not true. But this one from the Dominican University of California, it conducted a 4-week study with individuals, and it asked them to think about their goals in 5 different ways. So one group of individuals were asked to think about goals and just think about them, right? Another group was told, write your goals down. The third group was said, okay, write your goals down and write the corresponding action steps that you need to take to achieve those goals. Group 4 was said, write the goals down, write the action steps down, and tell a friend. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah,
so just much like you're going to the gym, you need some accountability. Same thing when you're trying to set some goals. And then this 5th group was told to do all these other things as well, but then also provide a weekly progress report to that friend that they had told about their goals. And look at these success rates. They're significantly different, right? So for the folks that only thought about their goals, only 43%, 4 weeks later, had achieved those goals that they were looking for. Whereas a whopping 76% of the folks that were more rigorous about this, who had their goals written down, who had the corresponding actions they needed to take to accomplish those goals written down, and who were checking in on a weekly basis, those folks saw 76% success in achieving their goals.
Now, this is just a study, and honestly, even though we're talking about it in the context of product management teams and how to optimize them, this is a useful tactic for just about any project. In fact, it has to be really tailored to what your team needs to be successful. We find that, weekly progress report may help, but perhaps if you're not seeing any movement, some kind of just short daily meeting, just to increase that level of accountability would help.
Absolutely. So you'll have to calibrate the amount of check-in you're going to need depending on the maturity of your organization. All right, so then what goals do you need to be setting as you're trying to consider how you're going to transform your product management organization? Of course, you got to figure out what you want to accomplish, but then how are you also going to measure progress? And there's two parts of this. What are the actual metrics? And to Rina's point earlier, how will you track success over some sort of regular cadence? And how often are you going to measure that progress? You're going to have to kind of figure out what these things are going to be right for your organization. And the way a startup operates is going to be very different from the way a Fortune 5,000, Fortune 500 company operates. So you're going to have to calibrate these things for your own organization. Okay? Now, the other thing to think about is you can use other tools to help you make this assessment. We're right now working on updating our own product management organizational health checklist. We have a sample here of the first couple of questions that are on this checklist. And this can help you kind of check in around all three parts, people, process, and tools, to see how well are we doing, where our areas of improvement need to be, and it's very focused on product management. So we don't have the new version of this available quite yet, but when we do, we will post it in a future blog post. So watch this space for more updates. You can also use your own take on this, and again, start from the prospect of, how are my people doing? What are my processes looking like today? And we'll dive in more depth about this in a moment. And what tools am I using?
Right. And you can also take advantage of this time when you're assessing your product management health to also include KPIs that are specific to your industry. Work with your managers and other leaders and just check in with your teams as to what they are being graded upon in their organization, and feel free to add that to the list.
Absolutely. All right. Next up, step 2 is create the long-term plan. We already mentioned before, you've got to have this long-term perspective, but it's very important. And what I have found over the years working with executive teams, it's very important to set executive team expectations that this is not a one-time event. We're not going to have some big explosion and suddenly everything's going to be better. It's going to be a process. It's going to take time. We're going to have bumps along the way. When I've implemented product review boards, we've had to tune it, and I've done it 3 different times. And even though I had a pretty good rubric for how to do it, each time I had to tune it to the culture of our organization, the way we made decisions, right? We also have this acronym CANI. You want to start emboldening your entire team to think about things in terms of a constant and never-ending improvement. We even have this logo on our refrigerator in our break room as a constant reminder that we want to always be thinking about how do we continue to improve. And I've mentioned before, this takes time. It does take time to achieve a world-class product management function. Now, as you're building your optimization plan, here's a good example that does give you some more specific areas to consider. So I encourage you, after you're done with the webinar, you can come back, and once the recording's up, this is a good slide to pause on and make sure that all of these things are clear. And we put these into 2 phases that we have found are kind of the traditional ways that work well with organizations. We're in phase 1, we're wanting to make sure that, again, everybody on the team knows the positions they're playing, they understand how things are being done in terms of decision making, and they understand their career path. It's important too for product managers to be able to see how can they advance. This is also the time to lay down foundational training. We'll talk more about training in just a moment. And then to standardize on tools and templates. And to Rina's point, you want to make sure these tools and templates make sense for your industry. If you're in the medical industry, where people can die if you make mistakes in your products, of course you're going to have a degree of rigor, right? You're going to have to really, and of course there's going to be a bunch of compliance or regulation you have to follow. But if you're in the industry of making mobile games, very different, you're going to want lightweight templates, lightweight tools that allow you to make good decisions, write down what the decisions were you made so that 6 months from now you're still clear on why did we make that decision. But it's going to be a lot faster, a lot more streamlined than, say, my medical company example, right? So you've got to standardize the tools and templates and make them fit for yourself. In phase 2, you're now working on building up, getting into the advanced courses, stronger skills, building even this product management community perspective, and of course, working cross-functionally. Right? And things like today, attending a monthly webinar or seminar for your continued education is very valuable as well. So come back to this slide as you're trying to fill out and figure out your own optimization plan. All right, step 3 in the process then is to optimize your people. And in this focus on people, we talk a lot about training, and we'll dive into some more details about that in a moment. But one other thing I want to point out is, and I've found good success with this, is you want to align your training with the business cycles of your company. So for example, we're in September, and typically this is the time of year when a lot of corporations are doing their strategic planning for next year. They start with their strategic planning in September or October, and they move into the budgeting process in November and December. So you want to be backing up from that. Can you anticipate in the spring, wow, we're going to do a lot of strategic planning in the fall. Can I get some training going in the summer to get my project management team boned up on how to become more strategic, how to do better competitive analysis, for example. So those sorts of things are important to align that so that you train somebody on a tool and then they're able to actually go and put that tool into practice. And then coaching is a key part of this as well. Now, mentoring is what you as a leader of product management do, but coaching is something a little bit different. Coaching is where you are getting others, either in your organization or outside, and 280 Group helps with this, to come in and provide some best practice coaching skills that help people move along in their career, and they get an outside perspective. Very valuable as well. All right, when we talk about optimizing skills to develop, this is a good list of what kind of breaks down into foundational skills and advanced skills. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I would encourage you to take a look at our benchmark study because it breaks this down even further. And that benchmark study will allow you to see all 15 skills that we encourage you to work on as you're working on skills to develop your team. Well, I think it's time again, Rina, for us to check in with our audience and let's see how much formal training has our team had.
Right, so we have launched our second poll. Please reply to, has your team had any formal product management training? No, but we plan to, and yes. And I'd like to take this time also, Roger, to highlight it's not just about training your people. When you're trying to create change, you need to make it really relevant for them too. So you're trying to move a lot of people to a higher level of engaging with each other and building great products. So training is one way to level set your teams, but it's also important to make that training relevant for them. So make sure that they know what's in it for them so that they can actually take advantage of all of this investment that you'd be making in them.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the slide earlier mentioned that in terms of show the product managers their career path, right?
Exactly.
And so having that be a part of why they're getting into training is very important.
Great. So now we've received our responses and we'll be sharing. So we've received a pretty mixed bag here. So about half, and actually that's pretty similar to what we've seen before, about half have received training and about half have not.
Right.
Important to note, about 18% plan to.
Right.
We do see that, and probably relevant to check in with the type of audience that we receive. We do find that on the earlier side, folks did receive less training.
Yeah, and in fact, that's what my next slide shows, is that these numbers are pretty darn close to the numbers that we saw when we conducted our survey of thousands of product managers earlier this year, right? So we see that, less than 50% have received formal training. And so we had 42, I think the number we just saw was 46, so very close, in fact.
Very close.
And so the cohort we have today is very representative of the larger group that we polled earlier this year. So this is something, and I'll be honest, right, having been in this for 20 years, these numbers are great compared to the way it was even 10 years ago. So we're seeing progress, but we need to make more progress in terms of getting folks to have that formal training. So let's talk a little bit more about that. How do you go about it? You want to make this not just, again, a one-time thing, but an annual commitment. We're working with several companies now, in fact, where we're in year 3 of training their teams. Right, so that when a new cohort of folks have joined the company, that they are then able to get the training that all of their peers who have been around for a while already had, right? So the foundational course is where you begin, and you want to get the full product life cycle in that course. If your teams are working with Agile methodology, then there is a need to not become like a Scrum Master. You don't need to be trained in the development methodology from the developer's perspective or the Scrum Master's perspective. You need to be trained in it from a product management perspective. How do you best feed an Agile team and engage with an Agile team to make them truly successful and be able to then leverage the benefits of what an Agile team is able to bring to your organization? So we have training for that, and that's something for you to consider as well. And then there's a number of different advanced topics. So as this annual commitment rolls out and you get people established on the foundational work, then how do you move forward some of the folks that show the most promise into more advanced skills as well? All right, so we have got to be able to back up our claims that this is valuable things for people to do, right? So we've got some study here from the Association for Talent Development. They show that companies that offer comprehensive training programs have 218% higher income per employee. That's now company income per worker, right? Than those companies without formalized training. That is an amazing return, right? And companies enjoy a 24% higher profit margin than those who spend less on training. So this training, though oftentimes considered a cost, is actually an investment that has amazing returns. And so as you're trying to pitch this maybe to your upper executive team or to your management team, these are some of the stats that you can point out to that team to prove the benefits of why you should be conducting this training. There's another aspect in terms of what Rina was talking about earlier, in the fact that employees who receive training, they want to stick around, right? So 40% of employees who receive poor job training, they leave their positions within the first year. If you don't set them up for success, if they get frustrated that they can't do their job well, then they exit. Yeah. All right?
So
go ahead.
So just to kind of reiterate and explain a little bit of why we're even talking about training people, when we're looking at how teams really transform, there's a plan in place, and there's basically the A to B, where do you want to go?
Right.
But how do you get people to go on that journey with you? You need a plan in place for how you are actually going to be communicating the new information, arming them with the skills that they need to up level, and training often highlights some blind spots. So oftentimes when we go into companies, the folks that we work with, they don't know what they don't know. And oftentimes what somebody might do, the counter argument is they'll just not do the right steps. And so what we'll find at these organizations where people are not sure what's expected of them is there's additional meetings in the gate review because certain questions were not answered, or the product manager has completely skipped a step. So this training is meant not just to show what are you supposed to do, but also highlight to people, hey, you didn't realize, but you weren't doing this correctly because you just didn't have that baseline understanding of what was expected.
Absolutely. So I see this all the time in the classroom when there's that epiphany moment of, oh, wow, we never asked ourselves that question before.
Exactly.
Right? So that is going to uncover these things that then help you fill in those gaps. So the second point on this slide is what I was talking about a moment ago, is that 68% of workers say that training and development is the most important workplace policy. And I've seen other studies that show that this is near the top and sometimes even higher than salary itself as a reason why employees want to stick around at a company. When they feel valued, when they feel they're continuing to learn, they want to stick around. Very powerful.
And when they know what's expected of them.
Absolutely. So then step 4 is optimizing process and tools. And some of the discoveries that Rina was just talking about go hand in hand in the training process. We say step 4, sometimes this is in parallel. You're working also on improving your process and tools. We do this a lot with organizations where we'll help them figure out where some of their process gaps are, or where they're missing out on some of the better tools they could be using. And we incorporate that into the training, and we encourage their leadership team to build out these processes and roll them out. So you want to be looking at your product processes, you want to establish clear roles and responsibilities, and you want to arm product managers with good tools. Now, our survey from earlier this year showed that 2/3 of companies have poorly defined product management processes. And so this is something that's really holding back a number of organizations when they just don't have a great process that's repeatable and that everybody understands how to engage with effectively. To your point earlier, if the product managers don't know what questions they have to answer at a gate review, and it's a little different every time, then how on earth are they going to be able to properly engage the next time they're at a gate review, right? So let's talk a little bit more in depth about this. One of the slides that I was excited to develop was the symptoms of a poor product management process. So I want you to think about these things. And if you're finding that these things are going on in your organization, maybe this is what is an indicator that your product management processes aren't as effective as they could be. First off, are your product goals not aligned with company strategy? Or are they aligned with a business unit strategy, but not the overall company strategy? Or is sales saying one thing, but the executive team is saying another? When you have these strategy issues where there's misalignment, these can be a symptom showing that, we haven't thought through our strategic context. We haven't aligned our overall corporate strategies with our business strategies, with our product strategies, and that's what's creating some problems. The second thing is that you keep finding that you keep revisiting decisions. They don't stick. Why is that? There can be a number of issues underlying that. Oftentimes it's when product managers don't have enough time to gather the data that they need to then be able to make a data-based, data-driven decision, an insight-driven decision. So that is a challenge that they've got to be able to face. So when you're doing that, be sure that your decisions, if they're not sticking, one of the problems can be product managers aren't providing the data. Another reason can be that you've got multiple constituencies all thinking that they need to be involved in the decision-making process.
Decision by committee.
Exactly. So we'll talk a little bit about that in another slide. Another one is that your products don't seem to address customer needs. If you find that customer service and sales are constantly asking for things that you don't have in your product, that's an indicator that, maybe we're not getting a good enough understanding of our customer needs and the products aren't delivering there. Another thing that I've seen, especially in mature companies with mature products, is that your development teams gain a life of their own. They just keep building new releases on inertia. They've got a backlog, and that backlog, though, hasn't been groomed or updated where there is actually insight into what new customer needs are. And this inertia just keeps driving the product forward because you're making money on the product. It's out there, but it isn't actually innovating, or it's not dealing with new needs, or it's starting to not be able to deal with competitive threats. So that can be another indication that you've got a challenge going on. And the last one is a pretty obvious one. When there's no product roadmap, that's pretty obvious. Wow, no product roadmap. But the other one is that the flip side is you have a product roadmap, but it changes frequently. And when it changes frequently, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be reacting quickly to the market dynamics, right? What I am saying is if you don't have a good product strategy that's been developed with a good product process, you're going to constantly be changing at the whim of whatever the last thing is that you heard was. And that can be another symptom of not having a very effective product management process.
So when our clients come to us, we often get the same question of how do we know that our product management process is ineffective, and then how can we measure improvements? And that's actually where we came up with the organizational health checklist.
Right.
So stay tuned, keep looking. I think our checklist will be released over the next couple
of weeks, I would think, yep.
And use that as a tool to help you actually track, what is going on in your organization, and also it can be a great tool for you to measure results. So if you see improvements in the certain questions that we ask, that'll be a way for you to show your leadership, hey, we did this change and now we're seeing this improvement.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's exciting when you see all of these things start to get better, right? Good. Okay. Did I go to? Yeah. So streamlining up in your product process involves making sure that you know what processes you have now. One of the key things to remember is you probably have some things that are going well. So as you're starting to change things, be sure you preserve the things that are going well. Compare what you're doing to things like an industry best practice. We, of course, propose the optimal product process as something to benchmark your product process against. And we have a download of the optimal product process ebook that you can read for free and use that as a starting point to compare against your existing processes. And the other thing here is you've got to open up your lens. You have to involve the entire organization to create these new agreed upon processes to follow, both in terms of, let me back up a little bit. First, you need the whole organization to assess how effective is the product process. So development team, marketing, sales, executive team. And as you come to an agreement about, well, here's what we'd like to do to improve, you're going to need to get buy-in from a number of different players to make sure that the new process meets all of their needs, not just the product management team's needs as well. We talked about this earlier. If roles and decision-making aren't clear, then these are some of the problems that you can see, right? You continuously are wasting time and effort. I have this downward spiral graphic here, and it can be very frustrating, creates unnecessary stress and friction, and you end up, again, revisiting decisions over and over again. So how do we solve this problem? One of the things you can do is develop a DAISY chart. And a DAISY chart allows you to look at all the different players, that's what the columns are here, and all the different kinds of decisions that need to be made, and understand how each of these organizations, or teams rather, have the right role to play in each of these decisions. Now, this chart is not canonical in terms of, like we say, this is the best way to do it for everybody, but you need to figure out what are the key decisions that you have and how are everybody engaging on those decisions. And two best practices here are you want to have as few approvers as possible, and you want to have one driver so that everybody knows who's in charge of driving the bus and getting that decision to the point where it can be approved. One other thing to point out is the driver doesn't get to just decide on their own. The driver is the one getting to the point where we consider scenario A, scenario B, scenario C. We recommend scenario A, we present that to the approvers, and then we get their approval. So again, more valuable. You can Google DAISY charts in order to gain more insight about that, or you can read up about that when you are looking at our OPP ebook. Now, great tools are another key aspect of this. And we already talked a little bit earlier about templates, making sure they match your particular company culture, company size, and industry needs, right? We have a thing called the PM Office Professional, which also provides you with filled-in examples of these and libraries of documents, so that if you really are starting at the beginning and you don't have templates, this is a great toolbox to purchase online from us, and it will allow you to see not only here are the right questions to ask yourself, the right issues to consider, but here are also some examples of well thought through answers to the questions. It can be a great jump start if you're starting from nothing, basically. Of course, there's lots of other good software solutions out there. We work with companies that are using all of them, Rally, Jira, AHA, plenty of others that can help you better organize your product management thinking and your structured decision making. And then you want to have a centralized product management portal of some sort where all of the information that you spent lots of hard time gathering and preparing and analyzing is available for everyone else on the team to see and take advantage of.
And unlike people and process, tools is one of those kind of easier to track metrics. So just ask around your team, ask around different product managers in your organizations, show me your business case,
right,
and see what level of variability is there between the different business cases. And that can actually show you whether or not your team is aligned on a single process.
Right, yeah, it'll be very illuminating, in fact.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, so step 5 is we've talked about kind of in the details in the first 4 steps. Now we want to step back and talk a little bit about holistic change management. And there's been plenty written on this. In fact, we're going to go into a study in a moment that will give us some insights. But be thinking about these issues. Can you get cross-functional team alignment, where you can get various different teams across the organization all in agreement about here are all the benefits, and you've seen some of those earlier, of what an optimized product management team could bring. How do we all work together now to make this come into reality, right? You've got to identify your dependencies and your deliverables, so your ins and outs, and making sure that everybody is served by the product management organization, right? You're going to ask other teams to make changes in order to optimize your team. You've got to also demonstrate to them the benefits they're going to receive. Better business cases, better product plans, being able to get to market faster, right? So you've got to be able to identify those dependencies and deliverables. You've got to do this measurement adjustment. We've talked about this a couple of times. We will keep beating on that drum. It's very important. Most important, though, is executive support. You either need at least one executive champion who's going to help continue to, especially when the going gets tough, continue to emphasize, we know why we're on this journey. We're on a 3-year journey. We're on a 2-year journey. Don't forget that. And that executive champion is going to help keep pushing the roadblocks out of the way when you encounter difficulties, because you're going to. None of this goes smoothly. So you're going to need that executive support. Ideally, the entire e-staff, but you've got to at least have one champion that's going to be able to support you as you make this change. All right. So talked about there was a study made by McKinsey & Company on change management. Big study, right? Hundreds of thousands of respondents over a 3-year period. And this is a great study, and I think, in fact, we have the link to it on a future slide, so you can read the study for yourself. But before we go deeper on this, let's find out what your thoughts are. When McKinsey discussed this, what do you think they found was the percentage of transformations that failed?
Right, and this is a good test to see how many of our audience members have read our blog. So what percentage of transformations failed? 25%, 40%, 70%, or 85%? We are going to just wait until we see some responses. But you're absolutely right. Transformation is tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's been a lot of studies around how to do it and how to do it better.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah. So we're seeing some responses come on in.
Yeah, so I encourage you, while we're waiting for the poll results to come in, I think the link is on on the next slide, in fact. You can then read this study yourself if you haven't read it already, and be able to gain some insights into not only why do transformations fail, but what are some best practices to make those transformations more effective. Now, we've already taken a few of those today and given you ideas, but if you want to read the McKinsey study as well, I think that's valuable.
Yes. All right, I will be closing the poll. All right. So well done. Many of you have hopefully read our blog.
Excellent. 57% were right. In fact, that it is 70% of transformations fail. So that is a astounding number, honestly. And we hope that what we've been telling you so far today is going to help you reduce those percentage chances, right? All right. Now, one of the key things that is pointed out in the McKinsey study, oh, by the way, I want to go back for just a moment. There is that link down there at the bottom, and maybe we can put that in the chat box while we're doing Q&A. But that link is then the link to the McKinsey study itself. Now let's go back. One of the key things they talk about is the fact that this failure is due to non-holistic approaches. Only 10% of transformation succeeded when the company didn't take this holistic approach that we've been discussing. So be sure this step 5 is incorporated into your overall transformation plans. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about that I have seen over the years, the typical challenges from a product management transformation, and this is both when I was in the trenches doing it myself, as well as helping other companies while I've been here at 280 Group. A couple of things that happen that can make these transformations tougher. One is that the product managers don't bring the data, so you've got to enable the product managers to be more effective at being strategic, being able to conduct voice of the customer research and competitive analysis, so that they can then get the wealth of data that proves to the rest of the organization the value that product management brings to the table. There are often times where engineers have gotten used to an ineffective product management team, and now they're in the driver's seat. And sometimes it's simply because there was nothing else happening. They had to do that. So you've got to be able to change that culture over time to demonstrate to engineering, look, we get it now. We're developing the understanding we need of where the products need to go, and then help engineering understand that they can then focus on the powerful value they bring by actually building the great products that we need. Another big thing I've seen is these transitional companies, right? They're no longer a startup, but they're no longer a 10,000 person organization. They're in that transition. Sometimes the CEO, at good companies, at good startup companies, the CEO is the chief product manager. That's a good thing. But at some point, that CEO is going to have to let go of the reins and let the product management team start building up their expertise so they can then lead the organization. I mentioned too, barriers, walls, and silos in the organization. One of the key issues that I see here is oftentimes when a company gets too big, so this is kind of a counterbalance to the previous point, when companies get too big, they sort of wall off internal organizations from the field. I've had several companies where I've been there helping them, giving them training or coaching them, and they're like, I don't get a chance to talk to our customers. There's no way for me to do that. The sales team won't let me talk to customers. So again, you've got to build up trust with the sales team, demonstrate that you're going to bring value by having those conversations, but you want to break down those barriers, break down those walls so that you are able to then get meaningful engagement with the market, and not just customers, but channels as well, customer support team. You got to build bridges rather than having all these walls in place. Another challenge to transformation is company culture. And this is another key issue that I've faced several times, where there is this precedence is one of them, we've always done it this way issue, but there's also a sense of people fear they're going to lose power if product management is going to gain power. What you have to point out to them in those circumstances is, by enabling product management to be successful, everyone is going to be more successful. And when the pie gets bigger, the entire company becomes more successful. All the leaders of these different organizations are going to see the benefits of that success in being able to do their function more effectively.
Yeah, but expect those kinds of responses and actually think through what's in it for them. What's in it for marketing? What's in it for sales? Sales, you want to reach your quota? Wouldn't you want to sell a really great product? Let's empower product management.
A product that you're going to be more excited to sell every day? Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So coming back around to this, Some of the best practices are exactly what Rina was just talking about. Work cross-functionally and explain to them what's in it for me, right? That is one of the most powerful techniques to demonstrate why you want to get why the other organizations want to get on board with you for this transformation experience. And you've got to just keep communicating. And I repeat it over and over again. You can't just be toiling on one thing like changing a product management process, which could take months, and not be frequently updating the rest of the organization on the progress that you're making along the steps of the way.
So in addition to communicating your plan and the progress, it's also really important to start thinking about the communication plan for the other people that are going to change, for the middle management layer, for example.
Right.
Get those bite-sized pieces about what's in it for them, what's in it for the organization, why is the new organization going to be greater, and actually draft some communications for them to use.
Right, absolutely. The goal here is to make this real change that sticks, right? And you have this huge impact on your organization and your career. One of the things I wanted to point out that you just talked about, we're working with a number of organizations right now where their IT organization is trying to transform and not just be a job shop for the rest of the organization, but actually start building products that more effectively serve the rest of the organization and sometimes actually even reach out to serve the customer. And one of the challenges they struggle with is folks have been in roles that are different roles than they've been used to, like say a business analyst role is a traditional IT role. You've got to be able to show them a path to how could they become either a product manager or a product owner in the new career. It is a what's in it for me, but now at an individual level in terms of showing people how, as we make this transformation, as we change, in my example, the IT organization, how are you going to have a place to play, a role to play in this new organization and contribute some new value in new ways. So that can be exciting, but you've got to be able to make that clear to folks. How are they going to play in this new organization? Because fear can be a powerful force that undermines the transformation. So you've got to address that head on. All right, so these were the 5 steps. Let's recap just to make sure everybody's clear. You want to be able to assess and set goals. You've got to be able to set goals that you measure and be able to measure on a good cadence. You've got metrics that you can establish that you know how to measure success and how frequently are you going to make those measurements. Have a long-term vision and a long-term plan. Understand that these transformations take significant time. We talked about optimizing people, and that's both training as well as aligning in roles and responsibilities and making sure people see what's going to be in it for them to take this training. As they conduct that training, you're also going to identify process and tool gaps. So you want to be optimizing your process and tools as well along this journey. And then holistic change management. The bigger picture has to be taken into account as you're doing all of this transformation. I hope this recipe then has been a valuable one for you to see how you can take these first steps on your journey towards transforming your organization. All right.
Great. Thank you so much, Roger. I guess we now have time for Q&A. Again, if you have any additional questions, please just put them in the chat box and we'll be sure to answer them. If we don't get to your question, we will be sure to also give you an answer after the webinar. So just to start, this is a question actually we see over and over again. So I'm going to paraphrase, but there's a challenge here because product managers, because they are accountable for the success of their product, they're often stepping in and covering for gaps that might be in their team.
Right.
So the question is, how can a product manager focus on improving themselves in product management when they're also trying to make sure their product is successful and potentially doing low-value work?
Right. Great question. So we talk about this in our courses as a product manager becomes a product janitor. And the challenge there is that product managers want their product to be successful. And they are problem solvers, right? They want to be able to just get in there and fix the problem. But when they frequently and over often get into this problem-solving approach, they aren't able to do their own day job, right? So there's kind of 3 things about this. The first is check yourself. Am I really the right person to solve this problem, or can I get help from somebody else? And then second, make sure that the roles and responsibilities are clear. Maybe you've uncovered a gap of, nobody really realized that nobody knows how to solve this problem, or they don't know that they're supposed to be the one solving that problem. So you've got to get those roles and responsibilities clear. Sometimes that means that there's a staffing issue. Oftentimes there is, right? This is a challenge I encountered a number of times where, okay, there isn't enough support in customer service, or they don't have the right tier 3 expertise in customer service, for example. And so what I would do there is put that organization on notice and say, look, you folks need to take over this responsibility. And I get that you can't do it right away, but let's get a plan in place. Let's agree that in 1 quarter, you're going to get, and I'll help you go to the exec staff team and HR and get the budget. But let's put a plan in place where we transition product management away from doing that responsibility.
So how can we actually include this work as part of the product management optimization plan?
So remember in step 2 and step 1 and step 2, we were talking about establishing roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
Very key to get that done, and you're looking at your process gaps as well. So you're looking at process gaps, you're looking at roles and responsibility gaps, and you're trying to fill those gaps in. And I went right to the budget issue because that's the one that I encountered most often as the barrier to freeing up product management time. So the first thing to do is show that the gap belongs somewhere else in the organization. The second thing to do is show that, look, if you free up my product managers, so we're no longer doing, in my example, the tier 3 customer support things. If you free them up, they will be able to spend more time on understanding our customers, building the right product requirements, and then we're going to have fewer customer issues in the long term because we'll build a better product the first time around. So you've got to be able to bring the value again, show why product management will ultimately be a better organization when they're freed from some of these tactical tasks.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we have another question here that's around how do we make sure that the decisions, when they're not sticking, how do we make sure that decisions stick?
So I found, unfortunately, it's try to when you're pushing against a door harder and harder, it just won't close any faster. Just trying to re-emphasize, we've made that decision doesn't work.
Yeah.
So what you need to do is get to the underlying cause of why does the decision keep coming back up? Is it because there are other voices that aren't being listened to at the table? Or is it because product management doesn't have enough of the fact base and also some emotion base, I'll talk about that in a second, to demonstrate why the decision is what it is in the first place, right? You've got to you got to have the right set of facts, but then you also have to be able to be persuasive in demonstrating that these facts are the ones that matter and these are the reasons why we do this. A key way to do that is to align decisions with company goals, so that you can show, look, we made this decision based on these facts, and it's done for this reason, because we want to grow in South America this year. And that was something the CEO said in our corporate strategic goal setting that was important for us this coming year. That's why we're doing this. Typically, when you can align your product decisions to higher level, either business unit or company goals, they tend to stick better. The other issue is for the unheard voices. I want to come back to that point. For the unheard voices, give them their day in court, but insist that they bring their data as well. And if they're not able to bring persuasive data that shows some other counterpoint that maybe you haven't thought of, right? And you do want to be open to new points of view, especially if they're coming from customers. But if they have done this work and they don't have the data to prove it, then you should be able to say, look, we're aligned with company goals. These are the facts. This is why the decision is what it is. If that doesn't work, then you need to escalate.
Right. I'll also give some advice around when you are bringing a decision to the table and you have a group of people that you're trying to influence, I'd also recommend actually doing one-on-one meetings before that decision meeting to get a sense of are there underlying things in the context of that individual that you may not know, and then it's a lot easier to convince people of your, the importance of making decisions the right way, one-on-one versus in a group. So another idea there.
Absolutely.
So moving on to the next question, this is a really good one. So they're looking for some advice on how to actually produce culture change when the response they get is, oh, we really have always done it this way. So because middle management and executive leaders often have a lot of influence in organizations, how do you challenge the norm when you're also getting stifled by this old school way of thinking?
So a couple of thoughts there. First, I want to leverage the point you just made, which was the one-on-one relationship building is crucial in those circumstances. You want to find whoever it is the person that is sticking to the old way the most and spend some time with them, understanding what's motivating them and why is it that they want to stick to the old way. So start from there and see whether you can build a relationship where you get a deeper understanding of the why behind what it is that's driving their behavior. The second thing is look at the underlying structure of the organization. Is there a an ownership issue? Is there something where the budgets were already aligned in a certain way that makes it hard to change? Can you get to those underlying sort of structural or financial aspects that might be underlying this? And then the last thing that I do normally is try to dig into your company's closet of skeletons and find a couple of examples where things didn't go well because of the way that we're doing things right now, the old way of doing things. It's a great idea. Right? And you got to be careful, though, because some of those decisions that were made that led to those skeletons could be now people that are on the executive staff. So you want to really get deep context when you go digging into these skeletons. But can you find the positives that you could point out by, look, if we change these ways, we could increase profits. We could increase customer satisfaction. We could become more efficient. We could free up budget for other exciting projects we've always said we wanted to do. Right? So you want to mine examples from your own company's history where the old way of doing things really didn't have a good outcome. But you've got to, again, once you know maybe the history behind what was going on there, go talk to some of the people that were involved there and get them to be advocates too of making that change.
Right, and I do want to point out, this is hard.
Oh, yeah.
We know it. We know it is hard. It's hard to convince someone who's kind of just done it their way.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, there's a lot on the line for them. But what we do find is that organizations that don't change, there's one of two things that usually happens. Usually the context is changing, even if your organization does not.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a window of opportunity there where if you're able to influence your executive leadership to actually embrace that change, you can actually step ahead of your competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do that, then now you're at risk of a performance gap.
Right.
And if that's the future for your company, sometimes if you're unable to affect change in the organization, change will come to it anyway, just not in the best way.
Yeah, and maybe it's time for you to make a change as well. I've had to do that in my career as well, where it was like, okay, the writing's on the wall, this isn't going to happen, maybe it's time for me to look for another opportunity.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but we want to speak the truth to this. All right, I think we have time for a couple more questions.
Okay, so let's get to this one. Give me just one moment. So another issue that people have struggled with is how much innovation is driven by gut feel versus historical analytics and long-term analysis paralysis. So this is kind of the flip side of the danger of data almost. That's the way I'm reading it. But yeah, and so let's actually maybe start talking about what is at the core of innovation and how that happens. You should definitely start with your customer.
Mm-hmm.
The data that you use to back up the production of a new product should always start with how are we serving our customer? How are we going to be serving our customer better? And that data oftentimes is actually going out in the field and talking to customers.
Right, absolutely. But to the analysis paralysis aspect of this, I have seen company cultures that struggle with this, where they become data-driven to a fault almost.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you have to be able to do is find what are some of the key metrics that are the ones that matter and focus on those and not get dragged down by too many KPIs. In fact, I had a conversation with a client once who was really proud of their new dashboard that had 30 KPIs. And I was like, I think you're missing the point of that first letter in KPI, which is key, right? So you've got to be sure that you really are focused. And I've encouraged my product managers over the year, pick 5. Certainly no more than that. And if you can get down to 3, that is going to help free up the bandwidth. If you get the right 3 or 5 of these key indicators that are the ones that matter, then you're not going to be too broadly dispersed on trying to analyze everything. You're going to focus on those things that really most matter. And like you were talking about, in those 5, there's got to be one that's about competition. There's got to be one about, or 2 or 3 about voice of the customer.
Yeah.
And of course, there's got to be one about alignment with your corporate goals, right? Are you helping push forward whatever those initiatives might be that your company's working on? This is a complex topic. I think we did an insight-driven webinar earlier this year in partnership with AIPMM. So if you're a member of AIPMM, I would encourage you to go watch that webinar, and that'll help you also with some more tips about how to avoid analysis paralysis and find the right balance of data-driven versus your experience and your expertise.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have time for another one?
Let's do one more, yeah.
All right, so I like how this question is phrased. So should the product manager be a dictator? So our VPs in business lines, primarily sales, have historically been the driving force for product management. And we're trying to bring that responsibility back to a new product function. So I think this question is around how do you navigate that kind of change?
Mm-hmm. So I've been in the circumstances where product managers are my team as a leader of product management was completely not empowered. And I've also been in the position where the CEO said, do whatever product management says.
Yeah.
And in both cases, neither works out well, honestly. What works out the best is when you are able to bring the value. As a product management leader, you have to be able to demonstrate the hard work, strategic thinking, and market research that you've done in order to justify the decisions that your team is making. Now, dictator, way too strong a word. Assertive, certainly, and assertive, but backed up by all those facts, right? So you have confidence in the data that your PM team has pulled together and been able to show that these are why the decisions we're making, not just because the CEO says so, because even that is not a long-term recipe for success. Because you're going to make products that don't work out if you haven't done all of that homework. And when you can prove that homework, remember I say communicate, communicate, communicate. One of the things I encourage is every time you do a customer visit, every time you update your competitive analysis, you want to share that information. You want to demonstrate to the rest of the organization that you and your team are the product leaders by being the market experts. So you do brown bags, you put stuff on your SharePoint, you are showing the data to your dev team frequently so that they all get the hard work that you're doing. And to one of the other earlier questions, people will realize all this work you're doing is why they aren't available for all that firefighting work as well, right?
And as we mentioned before, we recommend you use RACI and DAISY charts to kind of reinforce who will be taking ownership over certain roles and responsibilities in your organization. Mm-hmm. So as you're trying to do that change, definitely have it written down and clear to all the team members.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great, and I think we still had a couple more questions that we didn't get a chance to answer today. So we'll look over those questions and look for a possible blog post that answers the remaining questions. So thanks so much for your time. I do want to encourage you to join us for our next webinar in this series. Right now, we're going to do this webinar every other month, so our next webinar will be in mid-November, where we'll be talking about how you build great products with superior product management skills. So this will be a double click on the people and skills topic of the overall transforming your product management expertise aspect of this series. So thanks a lot for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day. We will send an email out. I saw the other question come again. We'll send an email out with a link to the recording so that you're able to view this recording at your leisure and as often as you would like. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great day. We'll talk to you later.
Bye, everyone.